Have you ever had the goal of creating a perfect work-life balance? Spoiler alert, there's actually no such thing. So if that's true and having a perfect work-life balance is something we can't really do, then what do we do? Well, we're talking about it in today's message, so let's go ahead and get to it. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Epic Everywhere, practical teaching to help you grow in your faith no matter where you're at on your spiritual journey. If we haven't met yet, my name is Emily, and I'm the pastor for Epic Online, and it's so good to meet you. As we get started today, I want to shout out anyone who's new here today. Welcome. If you're wondering what you can expect today, we believe that church should be fun, that it should be meaningful, and that it should make a difference in your life, and that's exactly what we hope you experience today. And happy Labor Day. I'm sure some of you are on vacation or maybe just soaking in some of those final moments of summer. And if you've got an extra day off this weekend, consider yourself lucky. I do, and I have one thing on my agenda: napping. Yes, napping. I'm so pro naps, but whatever you're up to, I'm so glad that you made Epic Everywhere a part of it. Up first on today's episode, I want to help you take a step towards connection. I'm so glad that you're here, and I would love for this to be the church fam that you never knew you had. So the first step you can take each week is to connect and to text in. You know, it's super easy to watch these episodes and kind of stay tucked away in the background, but I want to encourage you today to take a step from anonymity into being known. So go ahead and text the word "here" to 215-999-8575 or scan the QR code. And when you do, we're going to send you a link to our Next Steps Hub. This is a spot where you can check out some next steps to take and some things that we think will be helpful for you throughout the week. And when you text in for the first time, I'm going to mail you a free Epic t-shirt just to say thanks for hanging out with us. On the Hub, you'll see some ways that you can meet some other people. One of the ways that you can do that is by serving on a team. We have a bunch of different ways that you can serve here at Epic, whatever city and state that you're in. And it's a great way to use our giftings and to help others and to meet people and have a whole bunch of fun along the way. So check that out and sign up to serve with a team today. And I want to thank everyone who's already given this week online or through automated giving. I really hope that you can connect the dots and know that you're part of lives being changed. And people coming to know Jesus is possible because of your investment. I was one of those people. I was living in Baltimore and I had others not given before me. I may never have found my church home or met any of you. So be part of the joy of giving today. You can do that on the Hub or on our website, epic.church/give. Well, believe it or not, we've officially reached the end of summer. The kids are headed back to school, college students are back on campus, and the Eagles are ready to fly high. And here at church, we're ready and excited to kick off the fall as well. Next Sunday is actually the beginning of our fall kickoff. It's going to be a fun Sunday. I'm actually going to have some special guests joining me, and we'll also have signups for groups. As your pastor, I want nothing more than to help you grow relationally and spiritually, and groups is such a perfect way to do that. So make sure you're here. We're going to be talking all about it next week. All right, well, I'm excited for today's message. We're talking about how to manage our work life and how to manage all the other things that we've got going on. So let's lean in and let's listen up.
What's up, everyone? My name is Michael. I'm the youth pastor here at Epic, and hey, I'm so excited that you're hanging out with us today. Over the past several weeks, we've been in a series called No Limits, and I really hope you've enjoyed the series as much as I have. It's been all about how we can make sure that we're living our life at a pace that creates space, and how we make sure we have breathing room in our lives. I loved week one when we talked about the thing that makes breathing room so hard to have, the thing that makes sure we're living our lives slowly at the right pace, the thing that makes that so hard is fear, and how fear oftentimes controls our lives and actually causes us to live in a faster pace, how we're always hurrying because we're afraid we're going to miss something, or we're afraid that maybe we need to move faster because we're going to miss out, or we're not going to make money, or we're not going to do these things. So we have to always go, go, go. Fear and the control it has on our lives. In week 2, we talked about boundaries and how important they are. And we learned that if we want to live in the fullness of our freedom, we have to behave within our boundaries. And man, I just love that because it teaches us that boundaries aren't restrictions, they're guidelines, they're aids. They help us know how we can live to our fullest. Then in week 3, we talked about financial margin and how we can have that in our lives. We learned the importance of having a budget and living by that budget because it makes sure that we are able to use our money the right way and our money is not actually using us. Then last week, we talked about the importance of our time. And we learned that sometimes we can get so busy trying to do everything that we're not really enjoying anything. And we're just kind of going through the motions and going and going and going and going. And we learned that it's good and healthy to limit the things we do because we have a limited amount of time. I really hope you've enjoyed this series. Today, we're actually going to conclude it by talking about our work-life balance. And as we get started, I've got a question. Do you enjoy working out? Do you like working out? If you do, jump in the comments. We've actually got that question asked there, and tell us your favorite lift, your favorite exercise, your favorite place to run or bike if you're into that. Do you enjoy working out? When I was younger, I loved it. I don't do it as much anymore. Unfortunately, I still enjoy it, but not like I used to. But when I was younger, I was at the gym every single day, literally. My best friend Chance and I would go to the gym every evening. Shout out Chance if you're watching. And we did this lift. One of our favorite lifts was the Thor. We called it the Thor. Why did we call it that? Because we saw Chris Hemsworth doing it on his social media account. And let's be honest, if you're going to the gym and you're a guy, the reason you're going is because you want to look like Chris Hemsworth. So we had to do this lift that we saw him doing. And it was a pretty simple lift. It just went like this. We would get a dumbbell and we would just hold it. We just hold it here and hold it and hold it. And at first, it wasn't that big of a deal. It's not super heavy. But then, as time passes, your veins get a little bit more noticeable. And then a little bit more time passes, your arm starts to shake. And then time continues to pass, and you're gritting your teeth and squinting your eyes and giving it all you've got. You're pushing as hard as you can because you want to hold it as long as possible. Because after all, you don't become Thor by holding it for just 30 seconds. And you're holding, and then, you drop. You gave it all you could, but eventually the tension just got too heavy. Eventually the weight was just too much and you couldn't take it anymore. Your arm's numb now and your muscles are tight and you're just like, oh, my arm. Because after a while, the tension becomes too much. And after all, we've got limits. And the sad thing is, what's so unfortunate is so many of us live our lives this exact same way. We've got this weight of our work that we hand off to our social lives or we hand off to our families. And we're like, we need you to hold this while I take care of things at work. And at first, it's not that big a deal, right? It's not heavy. So you have to work late on Valentine's Day. It's just once. So you have to travel. You're going to miss a game. You're going to miss a recital. Big deal, right? So you're so busy at work that you just don't have time to find your person right now. You don't have time to go on dates or to put yourself out there to discover who is just right for you. And at first, it's fine. But as time passes, another game is missed. Another date night is missed. Another opportunity to find your person. And it just starts to get heavier and heavier. And eventually, the tension drops. And we're asking ourselves, why can't I find someone? Why can't I find someone that I can be with, that I can be real with, that I can spend my life with? It's because you don't have time. You're so busy with work and the tension is just building. You come home from work and your spouse used to be much more patient with you than they are now. And you're like, why are they so short? Or your kids are almost annoyed when you walk into the room. It's like, what did I do? The problem is this tension, this weight, they've been left holding it too long and it's starting to get heavy. So what we do is we start to scramble, right? We start to figure out how we can have the perfect work-life balance because we need to fix this issue that the weight of our work is creating. So we're like, how do we find the perfect work-life balance? I've got some bad news. perfect work-life balance, it's a myth. It doesn't exist. And I know what you're thinking. That's a really rough way to start a talk on the topic of work-life balance, right? If work-life balance isn't a real thing, if it's not something that I can achieve, then what do I do? Well, you have to cheat. Welcome to Cheating 101. No, seriously though, having a perfect work-life balance, it's nearly impossible. We just don't have the time. When we're at work, we're thinking about home. When we're home, we're thinking about work. If we did all the things at work that had to get done, we'd never come home. If we stayed at home and made sure that our family, our spouse, our kids, the person we're trying to date, if we made sure that they felt loved to their deepest desires, if we made sure they were cared for to the deepest cries of their heart, we'd never leave. So we've got this issue of thinking of work at home and thinking of home at work. And that's not balance, because then both of them are getting cheated. Or what's worse is our work life takes over both aspects of life, right? We give all that we have, we're grinding at work all day long, and then we come home and we're thinking about how we're grinding at work all day long. And in the meantime, we're cheating our family. We're cheating them out of the best version of ourselves. We're robbing them of this life that they've wanted and need because we're so consumed with work. So why do we do this? Why do we get ourselves in this position where work has taken over all aspects of our lives? Well, I think there's 4 reasons. And the first one is sometimes I don't think we realize we do. I think we never really went on this journey. We never embarked on this idea of, oh, I want to cheat my family for my career. That's not our end goal. It's just somewhere along the way, we just got busy. We never wanted, it was never our desire to cause unnecessary stress and tension on our family or on ourselves and our social lives. We never wanted to do that. But project turned into project, workday turned into workday, and we just got busy and it just kept going and going and going. And we looked up and before we knew it, we were consumed with work and everyone else had been cheated. Some of us don't realize that we've done it. Some of us feel like we have to. Right? Some of us feel like we cannot provide for our families if we're not grinding at work. If we're not putting in 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 hours at work, then our families aren't going to be fed. Like, sure, I'd rather be home more. Sure, I'd rather spend time with my family. But then how would we eat? How would we have the basic needs that we have met? You want to be home, but you have to provide. I think this is especially true for single parents, right? We can get so caught up in trying to be provider that we struggle to be a parent. Some of us, we just don't realize we're doing it. Some of us feel like we have to. And unfortunately, some of us want to. Some of us choose to let work take over our lives because honestly, work is an escape. We don't like being at home. We don't like being around our family, so we'd rather be at work. And if that's you, I'm willing to bet it's because somewhere along the way, the weight was getting way too heavy. The weight was just being held for far too long, and it gave out a while ago. So now you don't like being at home because it seems like your spouse is always yelling at you. You don't like being at home because it seems like your kids don't like for you to be at home. So you're happier when you're at work, and honestly, so is your family because they've been left with this weight of your work. Why do we do it? Those 3 reasons. And if you're single, you do it cheating yourself. You cheat yourself on the opportunity to find your person. You cheat yourself on the opportunity to be social and to surround yourself with friends and good people. Because regardless of what modern dating apps teach, the best way to find your person is still by being social. It's still by putting yourself out there. It's still by connecting and getting to know people. The best marriages are typically marriages that were friends first because that's how we connect. We connect socially. But when you're so busy with work, you don't have time to do that. So if you find yourself in one of these four situations and you feel like your work is taking over your family life now, or it's prolonging you from creating the family you want to have, what I need you to know is if we want to build strong families, we need to set work boundaries. I'm going to say that again. If we want to build strong families, we need to set work boundaries. We need to make sure that the way we're working isn't overflowing into our personal lives, into our family lives. We need to make sure those boundaries are clear so that our families can grow and be healthy and strive. Now, before we go any further, I want to be clear. I'm not by any means anti-work. Work is both necessary and healthy. Like, it's a biblical command even. But it becomes a problem when it causes us to cheat our families, when it causes us to cheat ourselves out of what God has for us, right? That's when work becomes the issue, because after all, someone can and one day will do your job. It's going to happen. It's just natural. But no one can love your spouse the way you can. No one can lead your family the way you can. No one can love and parent your kids the way you can. No one can find your person for you but you. That is why it is so important that we set healthy boundaries now so we can build strong and healthy families. So cheating 101, right? Cheat work, not your family, not yourself. And if that's not enough, I've actually got some biblical encouragement to help you too. Paul's writing this letter of Ephesians to this church, and it's a beautiful letter. If you haven't read it, I really encourage you to. It's an awesome picture of what our faith leads to and what our faith actually looks like. It's so good. It's so encouraging. But in Ephesians chapter 5, Paul says something that on the surface is a little crazy. And honestly, like, dude, what are you even talking about? So let's see what he says. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1 says, "Imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children." Okay, just think about that with me for a second. Imitate God. What? How am I supposed to do that? God, the creator of the universe, the one who breathed stars into formation, the one who is completely holy, all good, the actual absence of sin and darkness, the one who never fails. How am I supposed to imitate that? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, nothing. No stars, no planets, not even a donut or a cup of water for me to drink, right? There's nothing. How am I supposed to imitate God of all things? Copy him, look like him? I can't do that. How? Well, thankfully, Paul actually tells us in the very next verse, imitate God, therefore, in everything you do. Then verse 2 says, live a life filled with love, following the example of Christ. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God. So what does it look like to imitate God? Living a life filled with love that follows after Jesus. Imitating God is loving one another, connecting with one another, being real with one another. If we want to imitate God, we're called to live a life filled with love. And I just love that. And actually, if you keep reading through Ephesians chapter 5, Paul gives all these other reasons and ways and abilities and ideas of how we can imitate God. And then we get to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21, which is the start of one of the most controversial and honestly skipped passages in the entire Bible. Let's check it out. Ephesians chapter 5, 21 says, and further, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. It's not super bad, right? Like 2023, the word submit is pretty much canceled. We don't use that word at all unless we're talking about maybe combat sports, but it's not a word that we like. Submit is just kind of right? But other than that, like, it's a good verse. Like, live your life according to Jesus. Cool. That's what the entire Bible's about. Not a big thing. But then it escalates pretty quickly. The next verse says, for wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For a husband is the head of his wife, as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of his body, the church. As the church submits to Christ, so you wives should submit to your husbands in everything. That we don't like, right? That's older than ancient. That's not a modern concept. Submit oh, that sounds bad, right? That's not something we really like. It's just like, why? Why is that in there? But we have to keep this under this context, this umbrella idea of imitate God. Because again, this is one of the most controversial texts in all of the Bible. It's oftentimes skipped because of that. We don't like it. It's hard to talk about. But in its right context, it's actually a beautiful picture of what imitating God looks like. Let's keep going. Verse 25 says, "For husbands, this means love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy and clean, washed by the cleansing of God's word." Okay, so let's summarize all this under this idea of imitating God by living a life filled with love, right? Wives, submit to your husbands. We don't like that. We get that. So let's take out that word submit and let's just put in the word give yourself, okay? Wives, give yourselves to your husbands. Cool. That's not that big of a deal. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Well, what did Christ do because of his love for the church? He gave himself, right? So wives, give yourselves to your husbands. Husbands, give yourselves to your wives. Now, this isn't a marriage message, right? This isn't a talk on marriage and how we can live and love one another right. But that's the best marriage advice I can give you. Fully giving yourself to your spouse, knowing that you're not really losing anything because your spouse is fully giving themselves in return. It's a 100-100 exchange. And when we do that, we're imitating God. We have this beautiful picture of giving ourselves away. And that's what God did. It's this beautiful imitation of giving yourself. It's a perfect picture of what God does for us. And let's jump back real quick to verse 21 again, because there's something happening here that's beautiful. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Give yourself to one another out of reverence for Christ. You can't do that if you've already given yourself to your work. You can't do that if you're tapped out and you're spent because you've poured all you have into work and now you have nothing left to give your family. After all, it says submit to one another. We're not called to submit to our careers. We're not called to submit to our dreams. We're not called to submit to our goals, our financial just striving to have money. We're not called to submit to our desire for professional advancement. We're not called to spend all of our lives at work. We're called to submit to one another out of reverence for Jesus. We're called to give ourselves to our family. We're called to lead our families well. And then in doing that, it is the perfect imitation of what God does for us. We're called to give ourselves to one another, not to our families. And it's so awesome what happens when we do. We look like, sound like, act like Jesus. Now, can I just be extremely vulnerable just for a minute? Just full transparency here. One of my biggest fears about being a pastor and being in ministry is not doing that. It's not leading my family well. Because let's be honest, there are lots of pastors in our world that their home life is a wreck. Their home life is a disaster because they get so caught up in leading the church and building the church that they're never around their families. And the result of that, oftentimes their family gets left holding this weight. And oftentimes they resent the church and even leave the church because the church took their dad or their mom from them. That was one of my biggest fears as being a pastor. So I set out early that was not going to be me. I'm not going to allow that to happen to me. So even in Bible college, I took steps to make sure I was never the one who was so consumed with leading a church that I wasn't leading my family. And then I finally got my first full-time job in church and I was pumped. I'm working for Jesus and getting paid for it. That's the dream. Like, they actually pay you to do this. That is so exciting. So I'm grinding, right? Because I want to be a part of something great. I want to see thousands of people come to know Jesus. I want to see cities transformed. I want to see teenagers fall madly in love with God in such a real way that they lead other teenagers to do the same. I'm fired up about this. But meanwhile, I'm never home, and my wife is alone. My wife, who had just moved across the country to a culture that she's not familiar with, to just sit on a couch by herself. And she's thinking, I just committed to this person. I just chose to give myself to this person who's currently not doing the same thing. And just like that, the thing that I was so afraid of happened. And what was even scarier is it was so easy to justify. It was so easy. I am providing for our family. And on top of that, more importantly, I'm leading people to Jesus. Like, Caitlin, we met in Bible college. You should understand how important this is. You should understand how important my work is. But what she really understood was, we've been married for 5 months. And she already feels alone. I'm already consumed with work. And it only took 5 months. How much worse is this going to get? So we had to sit down and have a real conversation. And leaving that conversation, I knew I've got to find a new job. I've got to find a new place to work. And that's when the fear that we talked about in week 1 flooded my mind. And I start thinking thoughts like, am I cut out for this? Is my family cut out for this? Is every church job like this? Am I going to have to literally throw my family away in order to work in the church? Is that what working in the church looks like? How is it going to look to have a job for only 5 months on a resume? All these things and other thoughts are flooding my mind, because that's what happens when you decide to take a step back and say, I can't put work first. Our future, how we provide for our family, our goals and our dreams, and all those things start to become into question, because we naturally associate in our minds work with provision, work with success, work with money. So we're thinking if we don't spend all of our time at work, then we don't have all these other things, because there's a direct connection with work to provision. But what happens when we break that association? What happens when our thoughts go, instead of work equaling provision, to God equaling provision? What happens when we actually take Jesus seriously when he says, hey, don't you know you don't have to worry about what you will eat, what you will drink, what you will wear? Don't you know your Father in heaven will provide all these things for you when you seek him, when you run after him, when you desire to imitate him? Don't you know that God will take care of these things? What happens when we actually take God seriously and we actually trust him and we actually believe, God, if you said you'll provide these things, you'll provide these things? What happens when we actually believe that God is trustworthy? What happens is we're able to take a step back from work. It becomes easier to cheat work and focus on our families. It becomes easier to say, hey, no, I'm going to lead my family well, because I know God will provide for my needs and for our needs. And I know God also sees the desires of my heart and will lead me and guide me into good things, because that's who he is. He's a good father. What happens when we actually believe that? What happens when we take the time to actually build strong families and set work boundaries? What happens when that happens? Our families thrive. We live lives filled with joy to the fullest of our freedom, because we've got boundaries in place. That's what happens. That's why it's so important that we set good work boundaries so we can have strong families. It's what we need to do. It's what we need to do because a lot of us, we have this thought in our head that it's just the natural way we live our lives. It's like, God, take care of our families while I take care of work. God, take care of things at home while I take care of things at work. So as we conclude this series, my challenge for you, my prayer for you, is that you can flip the script on that and you can start praying this prayer. God, take care of things at work while I take care of things at home. God, can you take care of things at my work, at my profession, at my career, while I make sure I lead my family well? God, can you take care of things at work while I make sure I'm a good husband? I make sure I'm a good wife. I make sure that I lead my kids well and I love my kids well and I'm a great parent to them. God, can you take care of things at work while I make sure that I'm looking for the right person, your person, the person that can come alongside with me and partner with me and we can make each other better? God, can you take care of work while I take care of myself? While I take care of my family? While I take care of my soul? God, can you take care of work? Can you make sure that I have money? Can you make sure that I'm living a life of success? God, can you make sure that I'm provided for? God, can you make sure that my family's provided for while I do and lead the people that you've called me to lead? While I love my family well? God, can you help me cheat work so I can focus on my family? My prayer for you as we close the series is you can make that your prayer. God, take care of things at work while I take care of things at home. Let's pray. God, we love you. We praise you. We thank you because you are good and you are faithful and you are truly a good Father who provides for us. Father, I ask that you help us work well. God, help us have careers because God, especially in today's world when it's so easy to work at home and get so caught up with working at home, God, no. Let us be off when we're off, even when we work at home. Let us honor our family with our time. God, let us lead our family well. And if we have to cheat, God, let us cheat work so we can lead our families because only we can do that. And Lord, your word tells us that when we do that well, when we give ourselves, we're imitating you. And God, what more are we called to do than that? Than to look like, act like, and sound like you. God, we love you, we praise you, and we thank you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thanks for such an important message, Michael. This is definitely an area that I struggle in. I want to honor God well with all that I do and max out on all that he has for me. But if I'm honest, I struggle sometimes with not just setting boundaries between my work life and my personal life, but actually following through with them. And maybe you're in the same boat, or maybe you've got a friend or a loved one who does as well. Hey, this is a perfect message to share with someone else who might need to be challenged and encouraged today. Well, as I mentioned, next week we start our fall kickoff and we're starting a new message series called Funny 'Cause It's True. There's a verse in Proverbs that says that laughter does us good like a medicine. And so in this new series, we're using some of the funniest videos that we could find online to introduce our topic each week. It's going to be a ton of fun as we laugh and we learn together. I mean, who doesn't love watching some of these ridiculous videos? Remember this one?
Here we go. I gotta take off my glasses for it. Oh, naturally. Okay, here we go. So, yes! Now watch when my mouth actually moves. That's not me making that noise, it's the mask! Here, listen.
I can't. She could literally be doing anything and I would laugh because she's laughing. And we get to have a whole series wrapped around videos like this. I am so here for it. And I hope you will be too. We're gonna learn, we're gonna laugh, and we're gonna get better together. If you haven't accessed the Hub yet today, I want to encourage you to do that before you go. You can submit a prayer request, you can give, and you can check out some of those serving opportunities that we talked about earlier. And before you do go, would you take time to hit like and make sure that you're subscribed to this channel? Enjoy the rest of your Labor Day weekend, and I'll see you right back here next week.